Hello and welcome to the North Carolina Museum of History and the 26th Annual American Indian Heritage Celebration. The presentation will begin in just a moment, but we want to begin with a few notes. Remember to ask questions in the chat and we'll do our best to respond to them and share them with our presenter or panel. We have many additional resources about American Indians in North Carolina on our website. We thank the following sponsors of the North Carolina Museum of History Foundation for helping to make today's event possible. And now let's begin.
And she has been pursuing the art of storytelling for more than 30 years. It's my pleasure, again, to introduce Miss Barbara Locklear.
Thank you, Elvis. I am so happy to be able to be here to share some of our culture, or just a little bit of it with you. And storytelling is an important part of American Indian culture. Actually, storytelling has been around as long as civilization itself. And we all have stories. We have our own stories. We have family stories. And we have something that's called legends. Many of the American Indian stories have never been written. They are handed down from one generation to the next in something called oral traditions. So storytelling actually was one of our first educators, because that's how we learn about what's happened in our families, in our tribes. And many different tribes have different rules about storytelling. Depending on the part of the country that they're in, some tribes will only tell their stories at night, and many in the wintertime. But then there are some that's told for entertainment, and that's what we do, is we use stories that teach as well as entertain. As a matter of fact, traditionally, the people were required to listen to the storyteller. And if she thought one of the children was not paying attention, the storyteller would stop. And if that person could not tell the storyteller the last word she said, then there would be repercussions for that. But today I want to tell you something that we call a creation story. And it happened long, long ago, long before you or I. The maker had made all things, but it was not complete. He thought that it would be good to let the animals have some say-so as to what they would look like, what characteristics they would possess, and as it balanced out with the natural world around them, so it would be decided. So one day he was out in the woods, and along the path rolled this little animal. He reached down, picked him up, and he sat him on a log. He said, "Little one, have you given any thought as to what you want to look like or what you might need?" He said, "Yes, Father, I have given it a great deal of thought. And as I sit here, or as I go through life, I find that most of the animals are much larger than I am. And they can just walk all over me. So I think it would be very important if I could have long legs so that I could run really fast and get out of the way of danger." And the maker said, "To run away from danger, that is a wise thing. So you may have your long, strong legs. Well, what else do you need?" He said, "Well, if I'm to know when danger is near, I need to be able to hear really good in all directions. So for that, I need sharp, keen ears so that I can hear in all directions. And the Maker again said, that is a wise thing. So you may have your sharp, keen ears. Now, what else do you need? The little animal said, well, sometimes I may not be able to run to get away from danger. I may have to stand there and fight to protect myself or my family. So for that, I need a weapon. Whoa, said the Maker. I can understand your concern, but weapons can be a very bad thing in the hands of someone who don't know how to use them. So this is something we will have to consider. So what else do you need? He said, well, there is one other thing that I would like. I would like a long, fluffy, furry tail. And the Maker said, well, why do you want this thing? He said, well, it's pretty. Well, said the Maker, I can see that you have looked around and you see that beauty is part of our plan for this great creation. So you may have your long, fluffy tail. So the Maker got started. First, he's going to create his legs. He goes to the front of the little animal and he pulls and he stretches and he shapes the flesh and the fur until he has two perfectly matched legs. And he was pleased. Then he goes to the back of the little animal to make his hind legs. And he pulled and stretched until he had two perfectly matched legs. But when he looked, he realized that the ones he had just made on the back was a little bit longer than those on the front. So he was going to the front of the little animal to stretch his front legs and make them the same length as those in the back. And as he reached for them to stretch them, from behind him, he heard a voice that said, hey, what about me? I've been sitting here for a long, long time, and I know what I want. I want red feathers. That's very important. I want a long neck like a swan, and I want strong wings so that I can fly night and day. And I want a pretty voice and a pretty song so I can sing. The Maker said, you dare to interrupt me? Can you not see that I'm busy with this little one here? Now you turn away from me and do not interrupt me again. I am working with this little one. So he goes to the little one on the log, and for his weapon, he's going to give him sharp fangs. So he goes to his mouth and he pulls on his teeth and he stretches and stretches until he has them just the length he wants. And then he looked around for a flint so that he could strike them and make them sharp. But just as he was about to do that, from behind him again, he hears, hey, I've been sitting here waiting for a long, long time, and I know what I want. I want red feathers. Do not forget the red feathers. And I want strong wings so I can fly night and day. And I want a pretty voice and a pretty song so I can sing. And the Maker says, you are daring to interrupt me again? What since I told you not to do so? Now you turn away from me and do not interrupt me again. And you think about what it is that you need and not so much about what you want. So he goes back to the little one on the log. Now, what was I doing? Oh, yeah. I need to make his ears so he can hear. So he pulled and stretched on the flesh and the fur until he had 2 long ears that could turn and listen in all directions. And he was pleased. And now he goes to make his long tail. So he pulls and stretches of the flesh and fur until he has a great big ball right on the back, and he's just about to stretch it when he hears again, "Well, I think I've waited long enough. I've been sitting here for a long, long time, and I have been waiting as long as I want to." Now, even the maker can be pushed to distraction if he has tried hard enough. And that little one truly had tried his patience that day. He turned around to him and he grabbed him by his head and he twisted it completely around to his back. He said, "Did I not tell you to turn away from me?" It scared him so bad that his eyes popped wide open. "You have disobeyed me. You wanted red feathers, did you? Well, you may not have red feathers, for I see that you already need too much attention." He reaches down to the ground, he gets a handful of soil, and he smears it all over that little one sitting in the tree, turning him the colors of the earth: brown, beige, gold. "This will be your color. You wanted strong wings, did you? Well, you may have your strong wings, but you will not fly night and day. You will only fly at night. For I don't need you flying around interrupting me because I work in the day. So you will only be allowed to fly at night. And you wanted a voice, that you wanted a song. Well, you may have that. But your song will only be one word: who. For I don't want you to ever forget who it was that you were interrupting." Now he turns back to this little one on the log. Now you can only imagine how frightened that little guy must have been when he saw all that was going on. He jumped down off that log and tried to run away, but his hind legs were so much longer than the front that he couldn't run. He could only hop. And when he looked over his shoulder, he saw that he didn't have the pretty long tail that he had asked for. He only had one little ball of fur. That was the tail that he had. Now, I feel pretty sure that almost everyone knows who the little animal is, with 2 long legs in the back and a little ball of white fur for his tail. That's the little bunny. And the one in the tree that was interrupting was the owl. And we think about the owl, and people usually say, well, the wise old owl. Well, I think what happened to him that day, maybe that was part of what made him wise, because he really wasn't too wise, or he wouldn't have been interrupting the maker. And then he might have gotten those red feathers and the long neck that he wanted. And he didn't get a long neck because that would have been too easy for him to stick his neck into the business of others. Now, I don't think that there's any of you that would do that. But if you know someone who's always interrupted, maybe you should remind them that that is really not a good thing, because it makes you miss something that your teacher may be saying, and it's certainly going to make that person miss something that he might want. I never know exactly what stories I'm going to tell when I stand in front of a group. I usually have to think about it for a while. And also, right now, it's kind of a time squeeze. So I need to know, how much time do we have? Okay. She said we have a lot of time, actually, 10 whole minutes. Well, I want to tell you a story that is actually one of my favorites. And it's one that some people might have a little trouble really understanding. And it's about a turtle who actually thought he could fly. Now, I'm told that this turtle was not always the way we see him today. Now, the turtle is a very important part in our culture, and we use it in many different ways. But at one time, they say that the turtle just liked to hear the sound of his own voice. And he just talked so much that a lot of times everyone tried to stay away from him. Well, one day he was out in the forest walking along, and it must have been somewhere around this time of the year because the trees were turning all these beautiful colors of fall: brown, yellow, orange, gold, just as we see today when we look out. Some of us even in our own yard. But Turtle was walking around and we found that spot. He thought it looked really pretty, but there was no animals around. Where could everybody be? And he thought, well, I know what happened. They went off to play and they didn't invite me to go with them. Well, I don't like that. I'm going to find them and I'm going to let them know that I don't like being left behind. So Turtle set off to find all the animals. And he walked for a while until he came to another clearing. Just like the first one, there was beautiful leaves, orange, yellow, brown, gold, all over the ground. But there was no animals. Where is everyone? I don't have anyone to talk to. I don't have anyone to play with. Where could they possibly be? Well, he started walking again, and then he heard voices. So he followed the sound of those voices until he realized they were coming from up over his head. And when he looked up in the trees, it looked like springtime. It had birds with feathers of all the beautiful colors that we see on the birds in the springtime and in the summertime. And so he listened for a while, and he heard the birds talking. And one of them said, okay, my cousins, we need to be going. Pretty soon the snow will be falling, and we won't be able to find food. We need to fly south to Summer's house where it's warm and they have plenty of food to keep us fed all winter. Well, Turtle heard all he wanted to hear, and he didn't want to be left behind. So he spoke up and said, well, I'm coming with you. I am ready to go, so let's go. And the bird said, yeah, but Turtle, you can't come with us. Why, said Turtle, why can't I come? And the bird said, because you're Turtle and we're birds. Oh, now I know what you're doing. You are leaving me out simply because I'm different from you. That is a terrible thing to do to someone. You should never treat someone bad because they're not the same as you. But the bird said, no, Turtle, you don't understand. We're not leaving you out because you're different. We're leaving you out because we have wings and we fly. And turtles don't have wings. Turtle said, well, I'm smart. I'm very smart. I know if a bird can learn to fly, I can learn to fly because I'm as smart as any bird. But the bird said, Turtle, but you don't have wings. He said, well, that's true, but you seem to be pretty smart, and I'm smart, so I'm sure if we think about it hard enough, we can come up with a solution so I can come with you. Well, as Turtle was talking, two birds fly in with a stick, and they laid that stick down on the ground right in front of Turtle. So one of the birds said to him, Turtle, before we can decide on anything, we have to give you a test. We have to ask you a question. Turtle, do you ever shut your mouth? Yes, said Turtle. I shut my mouth when I want to shut my mouth. Well, I don't want to shut my mouth right now, but if I want to shut my mouth, I could shut my mouth right now and keep it shut for as long as I wanted to. The bird said, but if you want to come with us, you have to close your mouth around that stick, and you have to keep it shut tight for a long, long time. Turtle said, I told you I could shut my mouth anytime I want to shut my mouth, and I could keep it shut as long as I want to, and nobody can make me open my mouth until I want to. The bird said, but if you're going with us, you have to close your mouth right now because we can't wait for you any longer. Well, Turtle didn't want to be left behind, so he did as he was instructed. He closed his mouth around that stick, and the birds got on each end, and they started to lift up. And Turtle's getting up higher and higher and higher off the ground. His neck is stretching out and flying. I am flying. Look at me. I'm flying. And those birds thought I couldn't fly. I guess I'm showing them. Oh, he was thinking. Well, Turtle starts thinking about all the things he should have thought of before he left the ground. Well, first he thinks it's really pretty up here. And then he thinks, oh my, what if I go all the way south to Summer's house and get there and there's no turtle food? Suppose they only have food for birds. That would be a real fix. Oh boy, I think I have a problem right now. I haven't had lunch. And I bet those birds won't stop and let me eat. Well, he started trying to get the attention of the birds, and they were so glad they didn't have to hear him talk until they were ignoring him. Turtle had a temper, and he realized that they were ignoring him. It made him very angry. So he started squirming and grunting and kicking, doing everything he could, but the birds just kept flying along. Until finally, Turtle got so upset, he opened his mouth to say, why won't you listen? So now he's tumbling down, down, down. He can see the earth rushing up to meet him. So he pulled himself deep into his shell as tight as he could. And when he hit that ground, whoa, that hurt. And he looked up at the sky and he said, the sky dropped me. Well, he don't want anything to do with the sky ever again. So he starts to dig into that mud and throw it over his shoulders. And he's hoping too that this mud will help seal his broken shell back. So Turtle digs and digs until he is exhausted. And then he realized that he could not see the sky. But most important, the skies couldn't see him. But he felt so safe and so comforted there that he went to sleep. And Turtle slept there all winter long because it was so safe and he felt so comforted. In the springtime, he came back from under the ground and the birds had already returned. But Turtle had made a huge discovery. He discovered, yes, he was definitely different from the birds, and that was okay. because he had a gift too. His gift was different. He didn't have to fly away when it got winter time. He could just dig himself deep in the heart of Mother Earth where he would be safe all winter long. But he also learned another thing. If you don't understand something, always ask questions until you understand it before you decide to try and do it. Because you don't want to find yourself in a really bad situation where it could possibly make you get hurt. And then if that does happen, although I don't think it will, remember, you have a special gift and you can use that to your advantage whenever you need to. Thank you so much for letting me share just a minute about American Indian culture. And we are so excited that you've taken your time to spend with us today and let us share a little of our culture with you for this special time for us, American Indian Month. Now, Mr. Irvis is going to come back. He has some more information to share with you. Thank you.
I'll come back, Miss Barbara. You wanted to ask you a few questions.
Oh, okay.
You have been an elder and a wisdom keeper for a little while.
A long while.
So I just wanted to, for our folks in the audience, when did you first start hearing Lumbee stories, and how did you learn these stories?
Well, someone asked me that question once, and I thought about it. And it's as though these stories are a part of me. I have been hearing stories all of my life. My dad was a wonderful storyteller, and my grandmother, but I never heard my dad say he was a storyteller. And I used to sneak out of bed at night because he would sit on the floor and play poker with his friends. And so I would sit outside the door so I could hear some of these stories that he was telling to his friends. Usually they were real scary stories, mostly about the haunted churches and graveyards around the area where we lived. But he always told these stories as though these things happened to him. So I don't really know where the stories came from. I just know that most of them is just a part of me.
What are some of the most important stories to the Lumbee people?
Well, I think most Lumbee people have stories because we tell stories when we get together with our families. And I think the family stories are the most important because the family stories are the ones that keep us connected to our past, to our ancestors. This is how we know about our grandparents, our great-grandparents, even though they were gone before we came along. Through the stories that we're told, we pass these on and we learn and we teach our children and our grandchildren these very same stories that we learn. But they also tell stories about other people, about horses and mules, about many, many different things. But family stories, especially that we're getting ready to celebrate Thanksgiving. So there will be a lot of family stories shared. A lot of them will be embarrassing to the person that they're telling the story about because it's usually something silly or something funny, but these are the stories that we like the best.
What are some common themes among Lumbee stories, Ms. Barbara?
The common themes, first of all, is family. And we talk about food. Everything centers around food. The land. The land is very important to Lumbee people because it's like my dad always said, you can build more houses and there's more everything, but there's no more land. So the land is very important. But one of the most important things to the Lumbee people is the river. The Lumbee, what we call the Lumbee River or the Lumber River. That's very important to our people. And like I said, the land itself. And even though I live in Charlotte and my children has never lived in Lumbee territory, they still call it home. They'll say, Mom, when are we going down home? And they still call it down home, even though they never lived there, because they know that's where the bones of our ancestors lie. And I always say that Robeson County sand is very deep, buried into my veins, and it will always be a part of me, even though I don't live there.
What's the importance of storytelling within the Lumbee tribe, and what is the importance of sharing our Lumbee stories with non-Lumbee people?
Well, one thing I think is very important about sharing it is that a lot of people don't know anything about Lumbee. But I was really surprised Thursday. I was in a school in Lincoln County. I worked with 3 grade levels. And so even though we had to tape it just like this, I was able to go stick my head into the classroom door at the end and say hello to the students and the teachers in person. And the one thing those teachers wanted to talk about was the collard sandwich. I was surprised that they wasn't exactly sure about what it was wrapped with. So they were talking about that. So I told them, come to my house and I'll make you some. Mm-hmm. But it's important for people to hear our stories so they will know that we are a proud people and that we are part of society just like anyone else, and that we didn't just show up here. We have been here for hundreds of years, and we have a very rich, proud culture that we are very proud to share with anyone. And that's another thing about our people. Our people is very generous, especially with food. If someone comes to a Lumbee's house, most of the time you don't have to call, you just show up. And now I'm speaking of my generation. I don't know what these younger people do, but in my generation and my parents, even in the middle of the night, if you showed up at someone's house, they wanted to know if you were hungry, and they would fix you something to eat because we didn't have telephones. If you can imagine a time with no cell phones or even the landline phones, there was no telephones at all. But people would just go visit each other. And a lot of times it would be for companionship, but sometimes just because they were hungry or they had something they wanted to share. So these are some of the most important things, I think. But to us, I think it's important that we let as many people as we can know about the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina, because we are a vibrant part of the fabric of North Carolina and of this country.
Thank you, Miss Barbara.
And thank you, Horace.